The landscape is so unimpressive, like a face with little or no features. And yet when you don't have the feeling of ugliness or monotony, you get a sense of subtle, remote, formless beauty, more poignant than anything experienced before.
These words by D.H. Lawrence describe the feelings of the first Europeans to encounter this land, a place unlike anything they had known in the Northern Hemisphere. As they pressed further inland, they were struck by the strange and barren appearance of the continent, yet many were also to discover the power of its ancient beauty. According to Aboriginal legend, in the beginning the earth was a flat and formless plain. Each and every feature of this landscape was created by the windjama spirits, the ancient beings of the mythical dreamtime.
Since ancient times, we've been living on our land. We love this place because it's all windjama country. Our windjamas are here.
This land, created by the windjamas, has the same timeless quality which the Aborigines have experienced and respected for over 40,000 years. To the newcomers from Europe, it was a mysterious and unfamiliar place. To venture into this unknown wilderness required great courage and determination. In essence, the landscape today remains the same. What varies is our perception of it. A place that provokes a variety of perceptions is Uluru. Mysterious and awesome, it's considered to be one of the natural wonders of the world. Its power and majesty have made it a symbol of inland Australia. Surrounded by a sea of dry, flat country, Uluru rises like an island from the pancake flat plains. It's one of the largest monoliths in the world. Like an iceberg, it's believed that 2/3 of the rock lie beneath the sand.
You have to come out here. Everyone, every Australian should come out here and see this place because it's in our own backyard.
Uluru has stood in its present form for about 40 million years. The surface is flaky, and due to a process called spalling, the flakes peel off evenly. Uluru is like an animal shedding its skin, but retaining its basic form. It projects a strange and mysterious power, a power which is felt by the many visitors who come here from all over the world.
And I noticed too yesterday, people were around it and in the parking lot and climbing it, that they were whispering. And that's the same thing people do around the Grand Canyon. Oh, look at that, look at that. You know, and there's no signs saying not to talk. There's this invisible force of respect that you feel you must give, you know.
The giant rock is famous for its spectacular changes of colour.
The transformation was unbelievable. It just went from this wonderful dark red colour, and after about half an hour it looked as though it was on fire. Just like you see on the postcards, but you see postcards and think, oh yeah, that's quite pretty, you know, I might go there one day, but no, it's unreal. You just can't believe it until you've seen it.
Uluru is an oasis, and for thousands of years has been a source of water for the Aborigines who live in this part of the desert. The people consider that the water has been provided by their Dreamtime ancestors. The rock itself has been a sacred ceremonial site, and the caves around the base are shrines to these ancestors. Today, the Mutijula people of Uluru still celebrate their ancient culture. This reenactment tells the story of Liru, the dangerous and poisonous snake. Liru came on a revenge expedition to attack Kunia, the carpet snake who is non-poisonous and edible. Kunia was speared by the dangerous snake and made to fall down, and the holes made by the spears can still be seen today. Stories like this are from the dream time, the creation period itself. They also pass on knowledge of how each feature of the landscape was created. Paintings, too, may trace the journeys of the creative ancestors. These journeys sometimes represent maps giving knowledge of the land. Concentric circles may indicate particular sacred sites, waterholes or camps. The colours may represent spinifex, changing vegetation and desert landscapes. Through paintings, songs and rituals, Aboriginal people teach their children to know their land, passing on forever knowledge that is as eternal as the rock itself. 1,100 kilometres south of Uluru lies a vast flatland known by its original inhabitants as Bunda Bunda, or high cliffs. These towering cliffs form the southern border of the Nullarbor, a huge dry plain that separates Western Australia from the eastern states. It's the largest flat bedrock surface on Earth, and it boasts the longest straight stretch of railway line in the world, 478 kilometres. It's flat, barren, and virtually devoid of any landmarks.
Jack, she's ready to go down now.
Yet beneath this arid landscape lies a secret place, a world of unbelievable mystery.
That's the way.
Hidden under the Nullarbor Plain is the most extensive subterranean water system in the world. Rain trickles through porous limestone to form an endless maze of saline underground rivers and lakes. In this part of Australia, rivers run underground to meet the sea. Exploring this unusual frontier takes great courage and organisation. A recent expedition was led by Andrew White, an experienced cave diver.
You don't know what lays beyond the next step. It's not like mountaineering, where you can survey the top of the mountain and see what lies ahead. And that adds to the excitement and the adrenaline that we experience in exploring.
Concord Chamber is an air-filled cavern 100 metres below the plain. It's as big as several football fields and as high as a 4-storey building. The saline water is so crystal clear and gives so much buoyancy that the divers feel weightless, like they're swimming in space. They must lay out a continuous line to guide them back to base, but without it they could become lost, trapped forever in unexplored caverns.
You're in a massive series of chambers in this cave. The water's crystal clear, and you're floating through the middle of these great underwater caverns with white limestone walls all around you. And as you look both above and below, and you sail on, and you realise, of course, no one's ever been there before.
Just in the corner. Just down the bottom. Yeah, just in the corner. Bit of a surprise.
To be the first is part of an ongoing tradition shared by those who seek to explore the wonders of this land. When the early settlers first came to the region 1,200 kilometres west of the Nullarbor, they established the port of Fremantle in 1829. They were far away from England and from the other Australian colonies as well. Local historians describe how they brought all their belongings with them, from chandeliers to fine china, and set about building a settlement that would one day become the major port of the Golden West. They were the first of the colonies to be settled by free citizens and not convicts, and proud of that fact. However, when the labour shortage became critical and the colonies were struggling to survive, a decision was made to request that convicts be sent from England. The convicts were put to work creating buildings which still stand today. The ruling classes of the time believed that social order depended on the fear of physical punishment and of eternal damnation. Accordingly, in Fremantle, a church was put at one end of the main street and the jail at the other. This unique formula must have worked, because these days Fremantle enjoys the atmosphere of its well-preserved past. "12 kilometres along the Swan River from Fremantle lies Perth, the state capital. 70% of the state's population lives here, and its very modern skyline reflects the mineral boom of the 60s and 70s, when vast deposits of iron ore and other minerals were found. The boom also guaranteed Perth's future as a thriving centre of industry and commerce. Perth is a city of the future, with a pleasant climate conducive to a relaxed outdoors lifestyle. It's said to be the sunniest city in Australia. There's a great sense of pride in this city, and in a state so far away from the rest of Australia, a fiercely independent spirit has led to excellence in a wide variety of fields.
Wilson wins the footy.
Australian rules football is one example, where the Westerners are noted for their tough, competitive teams. The ballet is another, where a small and dynamic company performs against all odds in a remote part of Australia. Shane Cahoon is General Manager of the company.
West Australian Ballet is the oldest state dance company in Australia. It was founded by Madam Kira Busloff. We celebrated our 40th anniversary last year, and basically I guess we're one of the most isolated major dance companies in the world. Certainly in Australia, we travel the length and breadth of this state, from the Kimberleys right up in the far north down to Esperance on our southeastern tip.
Western Australia is famous for its wildflowers, which cover the state from August to October. Even some of the driest regions are transformed by a floral carpet after just a little rain. And in the wetter, greener southwest corner, there are more than 3,500 species of wildflowers, most of which are unique to the state. Also in the southwest corner, about 20 kilometres from the coast of Fremantle, is a picturesque sandy island called Rottnest. It's a favourite holiday destination for the people of Perth and other visitors. The island provides a haven for one of Australia's unique creatures, the quokka. Charles Hanson is a ranger on the island.
In 1696, a Dutch navigator by the name of William de Vlaming landed on Rottnest Island. He found the island to be heavily wooded and found it quite difficult to walk through the island. But also, when he found the island, he also found this marsupial, or quokka, which he thought was a large rat. And he called the place Rottnest, meaning rat's nest. But in later day, it's been changed down to Rottnest.
The quokkas are not rats, but small wallabies. They're nocturnal, and during the daylight hours can only see a few inches in front of them, making them extremely vulnerable. Once they were widespread over the south of Western Australia, but their habitats were affected by settlement. Today, with the help of conservationists, they thrive on Rottnest Island. "700 kilometres north of Perth lie the pristine waters of Shark Bay. It was named by the English pirate William Dampier, who had spotted sharks in the area in 1699. The very remoteness of this part of the coast has helped create a haven, a natural marine wilderness, and Shark Bay is now a World Heritage Site. The bay is visited by humpback whales and dolphins. The late Alice Ninny Watts befriended the bottlenose dolphins in the 1960s. At first, she threw fish to a dolphin named Charlie, and after a while, he started taking it out of her hand. Dolphins are now regular visitors to Monkey Mire. They live in the wild, in their natural state, but some come in regularly to the shoreline, making contact with humans.
They seem to have some sort of a rapport with children, and especially someone that perhaps is a little handicapped. One little girl in particular was on crutches, and we got talking, and she was so excited to think that this dolphin had actually come up to her when she was laying in the water, just floating around. She was just ecstatic.
Ranger Scylla Hurley describes the reaction of a woman who came all the way from England to visit Monkey Mire.
It's just amazing. I was walking down with her and she was telling me about her travels and that, and out of the blue the dolphin just came straight up on the beach. This particular one was Nikki, and she just came straight up on the beach and basically went more or less up to the lady, and the lady just stood there and the tears just rolled down her cheeks, and I got very emotional. And as she said, this is the best, it's better than I ever thought it would be.
Monkey Mire is truly a magical place. Kilometres to the south, in the southern reaches of Shark Bay, lies Shell Beach, another natural jewel of this amazing wilderness. Billions of tiny white coquina mollusk shells, up to 10 metres in depth, make up this unusual beach. From coquina shells to humpback whales and bottlenose dolphins, Shark Bay provides a very special natural environment. Much of inland Australia is sparsely populated because of extensive areas of desert which are difficult to traverse. These vast open spaces have long inspired writers and artists, as well as ordinary Australians. Here in Western Australia, there are no great rivers bringing fertility to the inland. Instead, there are vast oceans of sand and parched land that take up an area 3/4 the size of Europe. Despite the forbidding nature of the desert, many animals make their homes here. The thorny devil, whose armour-plated appearance is designed to frighten off predators. The black cockatoo has an ability to survive in some of Australia's harshest environments, along with the kangaroo and the emu, flightless but extremely fast. The deserts are spectacular yet forbidding places, possessing a special kind of beauty, a desolate beauty that inspires awe and wonder. Looking like the excavated site of an ancient city, thousands of limestone pinnacles spread out across the desert landscape 250 kilometres north of Perth. The pinnacles began to form about 25,000 years ago, when lime-rich sands were blown inland, forming a sea of dunes. Over the years, the constant action of wind and rain eroded the dunes, gradually altering their shape. About 200 years ago, the pinnacles were exposed in their present form. They stand like sentinels, projecting a strange and ancient power across the landscape. A 1,000 kilometres to the northeast lies a region that is equally parched, but was able to support human life for at least 40,000 years. The Gibson Desert was once home to many nomadic Aboriginal tribes. But by the 1970s, most had moved into townships and mission stations. These rare photographs are of the last of these nomads. Wari Kiangu and his wife, Yatkunga, walked out of the Gibson Desert in August 1977, so ending a way of life that had existed virtually unchanged for more than 2,000 generations. Most Australians never see the harsh desert outback, and few have good reason to venture there. Harold Bell Lassiter was one who did. As a young man, Lassiter claimed to have discovered a fabulous reef of gold somewhere on the eastern edge of the Gibson Desert. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, Lassiter tried to raise funds to find the golden reef again. His project fired the imagination of the public. Despite the tough times, £2,500 worth of shares were sold in just 24 hours. And the Central Australian Gold Exploration Company was formed. The search was on for Lassiter's fabulous reef of gold. Lassiter was appointed guide, and he clashed heatedly with expedition leader Fred Blakely over the direction in which the party should be headed. Lassiter's original bearings weren't precise enough, so aerial reconnaissance was used to recognise landscape features that would assist in the search. Then disaster struck. The support plane crashed. The radio failed. But Lassiter was determined to go on. When the trucks, beaten by the hostile desert, could go no further, Lassiter and camel driver Paul Johns continued, but they were forced back by a fierce drought. The two men had a falling out, so Lassiter pushed on, this time entirely on his own. His diaries and letters record that he found the reef and pegged a claim, but on the way back his camels bolted. He travelled on foot for more than 200 kilometres, but with his supplies exhausted, he could go no further and perished.
Why do I cling so to life when a shot would end my torment? It's because I want to know why everyone has failed me. To die a lonely, horrible death is bad, but not to know why is worse.
The Lassiter story has inspired many people, as prospector Des Stroud recalls.
The Lassiter story, the Lassiter Reef, was the classic story that people have become enamoured of. It's the story of courage, it's got mystery, it's a classic story that excites all real Australians who have a love of the outback.
Nearly 60 years after Lassiter's death, Des Stroud set up a modern expedition to search for the fabulous Lost Reef. An experienced metallurgist, Stroud led his team into the Gibson Desert. They found it just as hostile and untamed as Lassiter had in 1931. Even the four-wheel drives, specially outfitted for this sort of terrain, at times made little progress.
Currently 20 metres south of where they were last night.
20 metres. They're coming south. They're coming back on their tracks.
Yep.
And in an hour, nearly an hour, they've only gone 20 metres.
Yeah, unfortunately, in that 20 metres, they've also suffered a
create a nice hole for the next time.
Stroud found the cave where Lassiter took shelter for 25 days before his tragic death, but failed to find the legendary reef. Was it a figment of Lassiter's imagination, or does it exist somewhere in the vastness of this formidable region? The deserts of inland Australia can be cruel and unforgiving, but not every attempt to traverse the deserts has ended in failure. In 1872, an overland telegraph line was constructed through the Simpson Desert over a 3,000-kilometre route between Port Augusta and Darwin. The relay station at the halfway mark established the settlement of Alice Springs, and the original telegraph office has now been restored. Stuart Traynor is with the Conservation Commission.
The overland telegraph line and the building of it in the 19th century was regarded as one of the greatest engineering achievements of that century, and for Australia it was of an enormous significance because it gave us our first real communication with the outside world. And when you look at what was involved in building the line through 3,000 kilometres of largely unexplored country, it was just an enormous achievement. The opening up of the telegraph line was not only a communication breakthrough, but it really led to the development of the inland.
The problems of transport within the inland, with its vast distances and its harsh climate and terrain, were solved for a time by the use of camels. Originally imported from Afghanistan and Pakistan, camels became a common sight in the outback. Noel Fullerton is a local authority on camels and their history.
In the old days, the camel was used because if you had a horse, you had to water him every day. A camel could go 5 to 10 days without water. That's heavily loaded. But if you work him hard in dry areas, you must give him water every 5 to 10 days, so at least you could travel further. These animals opened up the Northern Territory, and they opened up Western Australia and South Australia and the arid areas. But it was a lonely existence, and a lot of people were always looking forward to see the camel strings coming in with their supplies.
For a time, the cameleers were the only means of supply to the great cattle stations in the outback. They also helped in the building of the overland telegraph and the outback rail lines. The role of the camel is different today, but the tradition of the cameleers lives on.
Young Jessie here, she's my great-granddaughter. We're rearing her, and she's the last of the cameleers.
It seems that Jessie has inherited the toughness of her forebears and their special command over these ungainly creatures.
Right, get up on his back, love. Yeah. Up you go, don't put your tongue out like that. You got him? Right, and then you get him up. You get him up for me?
Yep. And don't hang on to him.
Jessie may be small, but she's obviously not used to coming off second best.
Steer him out the other way.
Stand.
Steer him around.
That way?
Yeah, turn him around and I'll put him on the pick. Put him around.
Walk up!
Finally, the camel decides that discretion is the better part of valour. Camel trains were slowly phased out as railways opened up the country. A railway line was built linking Alice Springs with Adelaide, and the train was called the Gan, in honour of the Afghan cameleers. In some of the most inhospitable country on earth, life for the railway workers was harsh. Some built their own houses from railway sleepers, as Jean Poole recalls.
My father built this house out of sleepers, and had different, divided rooms and that inside, and would have had a tin roof, yes. And was pretty primitive, but it served the purpose. It was pretty hot. It was 50 degrees during the summertime there. No refrigeration, no lights, only candles and lanterns. It was a grim old life.
For those living in remote townships, the train was a lifeline linking them to other communities. Mabel Adamson was in Alice Springs when the first train arrived.
Oh, well, it was very exciting for the train and everybody turned out to see it. It was quite nice to have the train coming instead of camels, and you could get much more in the way of food and people coming, touring and that sort of thing. It made the town, grow a bit.
The tiny settlement of Alice Springs grew into a small town in the heart of Australia. With a natural water supply, it was a green place, an oasis in the middle of the desert. Through the strength and character of the people who lived here, it became a symbol of the Australian outback, as described by Neville Shute in his book, A Town Like Alice. Today, the Alice, as it's sometimes known, has a modern feel, but it's still a distinctive place. Camels in the main street link the past with the present and bring no strong reaction from the locals. Perhaps because of its remote location, the people of Alice Springs feel a keen sense of their place in the world. Alice is the jumping-off point to the many natural wonders which attract tourists to Central Australia. While it's no longer the outback town it once was, it's still a unique place. And unique places call for unique solutions. The School of the Air began in 1951. Teachers and students communicate by radio, and children post their work in to be marked.
Who's there with the other group and who has news today? Is Kirsty listening today?
Good morning, Mrs. Eva. Awesome news.
Righto, Kirsty.
Tomorrow, Mum's going to town.
The service is designed for outback students who can't access ordinary schools and covers an area of 1.3 million square kilometres. Ed Boyd is the school principal.
Alice Springs School of the Air has been operating now for over 40 years. It was the first of the schools of the air developed in Australia.
Have a look down at the bottom of page 26 and see if you can tell me what our map is about today. Kirsty, what do you think it is a map of?
It's an island, Mrs. Eva.
An island? Good girl. How do you know it's an island?
Because water is all around the island.
That's right.
There is really a very special bond between the teachers, the parents, the students, and that comes about with daily radio contact that we have with students, contact by telephone, computer, and those sorts of technologies now. But it just leads to a special way of talking with one another that's quite different to a classroom, which then in fact leads, when we have home visits, it's a very special time to be able to get out of your vehicle after a 4-hour drive and then have a little person race up and give you a big hug and cuddle, who is your student. And that's quite different to what you'd experience in normal classrooms.
Good to see you. How are you both? Gonna take me in and see Mum? Yeah, let's go. You got the bag?
The School of the Air is not the only group to use modern technology to cover the vast distances out here.
And checking the weather for the capital cities for those lucky people who are flying out. Hobart, 15.
Karma, an Aboriginal media cooperative, produces radio and television programs for remote Aboriginal communities, both in English and in their own languages.
And fine. You're listening to Karma Radio, 8 Kin FM. This is Jenny Peterson with you till 12 noon today. Wayan Yundubalya, Anangojuta Ninani, Murutulu, Amata, Fink. Ngailu, Jenny Peterson, Wankani, 8 Kin FM, Anya Balya.
You're with Jenny Peterson on the
General Manager Owen Cole describes its beginnings.
It started in 1980 with 3 volunteer workers, an old clapped out Holden and a borrowed typewriter, and they basically began recording programs for one of the commercial radio stations.
Since these humble beginnings, Karma has developed its own sound and video production facilities. It now uses the latest technology and broadcasts programs across a third of the continent.
This is the youngest act ever signed to the Karma music label. Warren Jr. and Clyde Williams. They are the Bush Kids.
It's not easy for people to experience the beauty of deserts, because even today, the Simpson Desert is almost impossible to traverse on the ground. It's the largest sand-ridge desert in the world, with row upon row of parallel sand dunes, some of them 120 kilometres long and 35 metres high. As he floats above the desert, Dick Kimber, local historian and enthusiastic balloonist, can't help thinking of the contrasting ways in which different people approach this land.
We're talking about the old Aborigines and how they managed to sort of pulse with the country. I think they moved with it, lived with it, whereas you read the old explorers' journals and they tried to fight it to get through. Of course, they were trying to get through, but they therefore tended not to look at the seasons particularly. They didn't understand the seasons, in fact. They didn't understand the country, and it's all natural enough.
Yet some have learned to understand it. Molly Clark lives on the edge of the Simpson, 330 kilometres southeast of Alice. She came here with her husband in 1955 to farm cattle. Molly raised 3 children here, and this isolated place became her home for 30 years. When the property was sold, she decided to stay on in the old homestead.
When your mind is isolated from everything else, but if you're actively involved in the things around you, you're not isolated.
Today, Molly lives here alone, and the only visitors she gets are the occasional tourists who travel the 4.5-hour drive from Alice Springs.
It's like anything living out here. You'd go stupid if you thought, well, I can't go to the pictures and I can't get dressed up and go shopping and I can't do this, and you'd let that eat away at you. Because I find that life in the city doesn't offer you a challenge at all. You just plough along with every other John, Dick and Harry, and life just goes on day after day after day. I don't find any challenge in living back in civilisation.
The desert must have provided the right sort of challenge to keep Molly here for so long. In the Pilbara region in the northwest, a different sort of country has attracted many others with a taste for challenge. In the 1950s, deposits of manganese, copper and gold were discovered. Then, a decade later, huge quantities of iron ore. Today, the Pilbara is the richest mining region in Australia. Gigantic machines are used to tear apart the dusty red ranges, and Mount Whaleback is the largest open-cut mine in the world. Australia produces 1/3 of the world's diamonds, and some of them are mined in the Pilbara. Miranda Duncan is a geologist leading an expedition for an exploration company searching for a new diamond site. The team uses sophisticated equipment such as this sensor, which is used to measure the magnetic features of rocks beneath the surface, something that couldn't be done without the use of helicopters.
By using helicopters, we're able to explore new areas so remote you can't imagine anyone's ever been there before.
Down at ground level, working in the hot, dry conditions becomes more trying, and things don't always run smoothly.
With those pipes you've got there, Tony, they've got fragile aerials in them.
There are no townships or settlements along the way, so absolutely everything the expedition needs must be taken with them. Work equipment, food and water.
We'll put our samples on the ground. They come out through the end there, up through the hose.
Miranda would like to drill in an area that the Balgo Aboriginal community has laid claim to, so negotiations must take place with representatives of the community.
Around this Lake Wilson area, which is just down behind the hills over there.
Yeah.
Now, well, as far as you're concerned, what sort of feelings do you have about us working in this area?
The negotiations will be ongoing, but for the limited first stage of test drilling, Miranda is given permission to proceed. Now, the back-breaking part of the work begins, for even in this extreme heat, there is a timetable to be met.
300, Zulu 155, over.
Miranda discusses the potential of the site with head office in Perth. The result of her current drilling will determine whether or not further exploration is to take place.
50.
Meanwhile, the crew moves on, for there are other fields to explore. 1,500 kilometres northeast of the Pilbara lies the Kimberley region. Some who come to the Kimberley seek a different kind of wealth, for the Kimberley is an area incredibly rich in wilderness, with vast tracts of land that remain wild and untouched. Stanley Breeden and Belinda Wright are professional photographers based in Queensland who've come here on a special assignment. They've got 3 weeks in which to film wildlife and other interesting features of the Kimberley for a documentary film project. The Kimberley has unsealed roads and covers an area of 150,000 square kilometres. To meet the tight schedule, they engage the help of Sam Lovell, an Aboriginal tour guide with an intimate knowledge of the country. Sam has spotted a goanna by the roadside and stops for a close inspection of this amazing creature. Goannas are the largest of the Australian lizards, and some can grow up to 2 metres in length.
It looks like he's been in some fight sometime ago.
Yeah, he got a battle scar.
Sam has spent much of his life in the bush and knows how to handle bush creatures safely without hurting them or getting hurt himself. Stan and Belinda want to get on to the first camping site, so they don't stop to photograph this one. Sam decides that the safest place to leave the goanna is back on the tree trunk where he found him.
He's going to jump back, try and grab me. See you later, mate.
Next morning, Stan and Belinda find a group of cycads, which belong to one of the most ancient plant families on Earth. The Kimberley is one of the few places in the world where they can still be found. One of the group's main destinations is Windjama Gorge at the southern edge of the Kimberley. The gorge has permanent waterholes which provide a haven for wildlife in the area. Here, Stan and Belinda will find many of the creatures they wish to photograph, all within close proximity to the gorge. Belinda finds the best specimen of the frill-necked lizard she has ever seen, a photographer's dream. Closer to the waterholes, Stan finds a range of creatures which don't seem to mind being photographed at all. Stan is experienced in handling snakes and other creatures in the wild. After all, he and Belinda have made at least 10 major wildlife films all over the world. They have a special interest in the flying foxes, having spent 2 months in a treetop hide on a previous assignment. It's not just the wildlife they wish to photograph. They're interested in viewing ancient rock paintings that can be found around the gorge. David Moaljali, an Aboriginal elder who has custody of this sacred site, must first sing to the windjama spirits to tell them who is coming before the visitors can approach. Once the spirits have been appeased, Belinda and Stan are free to photograph the paintings. They are told of the legends that describe how the windjama spirits created all the features of the earth, entering it at the places where their images are recorded on the rock. It is said that from these galleries, the windjamas survey the lands and all that they created. They could well have created the bungles, a mystical and fantastic landscape to be found on the eastern edge of the Kimberley. The bungles are an ancient plateau carved out of sandstone by millions of years of erosion. Stan and Belinda are well into their journey now. Having travelled and photographed their way through 400 kilometres of the hot and sunburnt Kimberley, they take a break from their busy schedule to enjoy a day just walking through the endless maze of pinnacles, towering cliffs and gorges, which is the bungles. The last stop on their journey through the Kimberley is the small Aboriginal community at Uluru. The only settlement on the northern Kimberley coastline, it was established by Spanish Benedictine monks in 1908. Today, the community here is run by Aboriginal people, and through Sam, Belinda and Stan have been given permission to stay in Uluru for a few days, long enough to make some new friends. Mary and Dolores show Belinda how to find edible roots by digging in the ground with a stick. Although many Aboriginal people here are Christian, they consider their traditional culture to be vitally important. The visitors have been invited to attend a corroboree and to share in the excitement as the dancers decorate themselves with ochre in preparation for this ceremonial occasion.
Yeah, I got red and white together.
The Aboriginal people believe that the windjama spirits have given them the responsibility to look after the land and to celebrate their tribal rituals. Only in this way will the natural world and life itself be preserved. Stan and Belinda have almost finished their Kimberley assignment and complete their journey with a visit to one of the most spectacular sights in all this wonderful wilderness, the Mitchell Plateau. Not all of the Kimberley region is a wilderness. It's also home to some of the largest cattle stations in the world, varying from 500,000 to 1.25 million acres. Aboriginal stockmen have been vitally important to the cattle industry since it first began in the Kimberley. While motorbikes and helicopters have replaced horses in some areas, parts of the Kimberley are so rugged that the cattle muster is best done on horseback. In the horsemanship is still a prized skill, and the biggest contact sport in the area is the rodeo.
And he's still having a go.
You just feel like you're going to explode. That's when I get up in the bronc. And I'll get on down, I'll check my rig a bit, get in there, screw my hand in, and I don't waste too much time in the shoots. You get hurt in the shoots. So I just get in there, and you just hang tough, and you just nod for the gate.
Let's go!
Bruises and broken bones are common as the riders grapple with wild horses. Even more dangerous than the horses are the bulls, who are incredibly powerful.
Well, I don't know what goes through my mind. I just dare to ride it. Oh, it feels good if you got a good bull. Yeah, if you got a good bull underneath you, it feels real good.
The rider has stayed on just long enough to win his event and enjoys his moment of triumph. People relate to the animal world in different ways. 600 kilometres due west, near the town of Broome, John Fallor studies the movements of migratory birds in Roebuck Bay.
The tundra area in Russia becomes covered in snow and ice, and they have to leave there. That's the chicks, everything, and they head south. Now, some of them go to Europe, some of them go to South America, some of them go to Africa. Roebuck Bay is only 25 kilometres across, but it has some 55,000 hectares of mud-flat feeding ground. That's the size of Sydney Harbour.
Well before the appearance of birds on the planet, huge creatures used to haunt this area and left their indelible marks on these shores. At the northern edge of Roebuck Bay, the low tides exposed giant dinosaur footprints 120 million years old. Paul Fuchs conducts guided tours of the footprints and is an expert on the subject.
And maybe some ornithopods, which are sort of like the duck-billed dinosaurs. It's a real Jurassic Park. This is not a film mock-up, but this is a real thing with the dinosaurs running across the rocks and the plants all squashed in between the fossils. And so I try to encourage people to look after this. It's our heritage.
Broome is one of only a handful of towns scattered along the vast stretches of Western Australia's northern coastline. Broome's natural heritage is complemented by a fascinating past. It's always been a pearling town. By 1910, Broome was the pearling capital of the world. Finding pearls was a matter of luck. The divers were after mother of pearl from the oyster shell. This was used to manufacture buttons and was a valuable commodity before the advent of plastic. For a time, Broome provided 80% of the world's pearl shell needs. Divers were brought in from Asia: Japanese, Malays, Timorese, Filipinos and Chinese. Broome and the pearling industry developed a powerful mystique, but the reality was far from romantic. Death was common. Divers drowned in their cumbersome diving suits, many were killed by the bends, and during the wet season there was the risk of cyclones. There are more than 600 Japanese graves in the cemetery, many of them the graves of men who lost their lives in the pearling industry. Pearl Hamaguchi is the wife of a diver who survived.
The luggers would sail in, and if anything, bad happened, they'd come in with a half mask, And we said, oh my God, which luggers and no binoculars, anything. Yeah, the two wives were there wondering, whose husband it is, and it was terrible when we did find out, because the dinghy just came in, they were the old rowboats, and here was this body covered with canvas. And the wives are hysterical and saying, who is it? And they called out his name. Yes, it was the second diver. It was a sad experience for us.
The dangers of pearling did unite a multitude of races and created a bond which is as strong today as it always was. A member of one of the district's pioneer families, the late Dame Mary Durack, recalled an amusing story.
The Governor-General paid a visit to the place in 1901 and was quite astonished at what he saw. He'd never seen such a polyglot lot of people. And one of the pearlers said, yes, I think we can boast a representative of every race in the world. And the Governor-General was amused at this remark, and he said, find me an Eskimo. And the legend goes that he did. They did.
Today, there are no Eskimo pearl divers, but Broome is still a pearling centre. These days, the prize is cultivated pearls rather than mother of pearl. Shells are gathered, prepared for the cultivation of the pearl, then placed back in the warm sea. Pearling industry identity, Russell Hannigan.
In the areas off Broome, you have a pristine environment, pristine waters, non-polluted. You have a nice tidal flow, which leads to easy reproduction of the pearl shell. And also because the pearl shell are filter feeders, you have the tidal waters flowing over the pearl shell. They open and they feed through the gills. You have a perfect environment for the pearl shell to live.
The pearling industry may have changed, but the town of Broome remains much the same as it's always been. The colourful legacy of pearling has made Broome a special place, and each year the people celebrate the town's unique history. With its bustling sense of excitement and exotic sounds, it's more like an Asian town, unlike any other place you would find in Australia. Dame Mary Durack was always perceptive about this land.
The north of Western Australia has always been a most enigmatical country. People have seen from the beginning prospects of fortunes to be made. Every time I fly over this country, I become more amazed to think, how did they do it? Not knowing what lay ahead of them, what hazards, and or how they were going to make out.
The grand scale of the country, the vast distances and the extraordinary features give this land a special quality. It's a land which demands respect, for to survive in this part of Australia requires special qualities of the people who venture here. They were the first inhabitants who learned to live in harmony with the land. There were those who would explore the unknown. There were others who defied the deserts in search of wealth. There were those who identify with the creatures of the wild. And some who simply love the land. It's a land of strange and haunting beauty, a frontier which defies those who seek to tame it. Yet it is a land where anything is possible, a land where legends are created.